Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it so you're notified when new videos go up. I make new videos every week. So yeah, join the extra vegan family. Or you can follow me on Instagram at Going Vegan. And yeah, today we're making vegan tuna cakes / vegan tuna melts. And the great thing I've found about vegan seafood, I mean, before going vegan, I loved seafood. But for those of you who previously didn't like seafood, I encourage you to try vegan seafood because I really think it's a great opportunity to kind of get into that arena with without everything being like overwhelmingly fishy and having those fishy textures. So that's what's going to happen with our tuna cakes. It's going to kind of mimic, that light flakiness of tuna cakes, but it's just going to be so good. So let's get into it. Before we start assembling our actual vegan tuna patties, we're going to make our simmering broth. And for that, you just want to fill a small saucepan about like halfway with water. And then this is where we're going to make our stock. Now, if you have like a pre-made vegan chicken broth, use that. I'm just going to be using the Better Than Bouillon No Chicken base. And we're going to make this, we kind of want this to be a very concentrated broth. So I did about 2 tablespoons worth. I'm going to adjust after if I need to, but next I'm going to add my furikake seasoning. If you had just plain seaweed flakes, that's fine. This just has a little bit extra with sesame seeds, so it's not absolutely necessary, but we're going to add a bunch of that, and that's what's going to be our sea taste, our kind of sea broth. Once our broth is prepared, we can set it aside and work on what's going to go into the broth, which is tempeh. So for our tempeh, we're using a whole block. I've just easily split it into 2 halves. And then what we're going to do is you can either crumble it. So you could take a piece like this and just kind of crumble it into your broth, like so. Or you can also, nicely cut cubes and put them in that way. It really doesn't matter. We just want to boil the tempeh to 1, soften it, and then also to impart all of that broth flavor into it. And tempeh tends to be a little bit bitter, so this will help removing some of that bitterness. But yeah, this is what you want to do. Once our tempeh is crumbled and in the broth, we can put the pot on the stove and we want to bring it to a boil. And then once it starts boiling, turn it all the way low to a simmer and put a lid on it. And then we want to leave it, kind of steaming in the pot for 10 to 20 minutes. And then we will drain it and set it aside. So while our tempeh is on the stove doing its thing, we're going to prep the next assistive ingredient, which is hearts of palm. I've taken half a can of hearts of palm, and I had the salad cut kind, so it's already kind of pre-chopped for you. I took half a can of that, rinsed and drained them. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of, you know, make them stringy. Just kind of like mush them with my hands into these chunks. And just break them down. And this is what's going to give more of that shredded tuna texture. And you don't have to be precise with this at all. Some chunks can definitely be bigger than others. You can always mash them finer later. We just don't want them to turn to absolute mush right now, because what we're going to do next is transfer them to a frying pan, and we're going to brown and saute these babies in butter. Got ahead and added our hearts of palm to a small fry pan that had about half a tablespoon of vegan butter in it. And then we're just going to let these saute in the butter, absorb that butter flavor, and get nice and crisp. So our hearts of palm don't need a ton of color on them. You know, once they start getting to this point where they're kind of golden brown, we can turn them off the heat and set them aside because we don't want them to completely disintegrate. I went ahead and transferred our hearts of palm to a glass bowl, and in there I just mashed them up with a fork a little bit to give them some more texture and to not be so big of chunks. And then what we can do is add our drained tempeh. And then what we want to do is the same thing that we did to the hearts of palm and kind of use a fork or our hands, but you might have to wait for it to cool a bit, to break it down into easier to eat chunks. Once our mixture is more cohesive and we've mushed it together and mixed it, we can season it. And this needs a lot of seasonings, guys. So really don't hold back. Don't feel like you're putting too much because it's a big batch and we really want those flavors to stand out after frying, especially once we put our binder in. So we're going to start with some salt. And then because this also includes salt, you can add Old Bay if you want that traditional seafoody taste. I prefer something with a little bit of a kick, so I'm putting in Creole seasoning. About a good teaspoon of that. Then I'm adding a pinch of dried dill. A quarter of a teaspoon to half a teaspoon of dill. I'm adding a teaspoon, well, half a teaspoon of dried parsley. If you had fresh parsley, I would do a teaspoon. Then I'm going to add garlic powder. About a half a teaspoon. A pinch of pepper. And again, more of our furikake seasoning or dried seaweed, whichever you're using. And feel free to be liberal with that because it's what's giving it the seafoody taste. For wet ingredients, we're going to add a splash of hot sauce. Feel free to omit if you don't like. As well as a smidge of mustard. And then we'll get this mixed. Once your mixture is mixed and seasoned to taste, I did not add anything to mine. My measurements were fine for mine. Then you want to add a good like third to half of a white onion, pretty fairly chopped, almost minced like garlic, along with a tablespoon of minced caper. If you don't like capers, feel free to omit, but they're also going to lend some of that briny seafood taste. We're also at this point going to add just a splash of the caper brine, as well as the brine from the can of the hearts of palm. Just, you know, a drizzle. And get that all mixed up. Now, with everything mixed together, we can add our binder. And so you can do this 3 ways. You can do all chickpea flour, you can do all plain breadcrumbs, or you can do a mixture of both. We're going to be doing a mixture of both, only because the only caveat to doing all chickpea flour is it will kind of overtake all of the flavor, and so you'll just have to go back and add extra seasoning, because this will lend its chickpea flavor to the mixture, and it will kind of overpower it if you don't re-season. The same thing with breadcrumbs. It won't ruin the flavor at all, but it will kind of make your cakes a little more crumbly, prone to breaking. So really it's up to you. If you don't have chickpea flour, feel free to do just plain breadcrumbs. But yeah, we're doing a mixture, and so you kind of want to eyeball it. You know, I did about 1/3 of a cup of the chickpea flour and even less of the plain breadcrumbs, because we don't want these to be too bready. You know, we still want them to be a nice flaky tuna cake. So we're gonna mix this and see what the texture's looking like. Now, when your mixture, after adding in your binder, is at a point where, you know, if you press it, it holds its shape, and then if you turn your spoon upside down, it kind of holds, then you can start forming your patties. I'm just gonna form mine on a plate using a tablespoon. We'll see how many I get out of it. It varies every time depending on what size you want to make them. Sometimes I've gotten 4 patties, sometimes I've gotten 6. So yeah, and if you want a little extra crunch on the top, what you can do is put down some panko breadcrumbs here while you're forming your patty, and so then coat both sides before we fry them up.